If parenting feels heavy, it might not be what you're doing, it might be how closely you're watching yourself. Before we begin, I want to name something gently because it's something so many conscious mothers carry, often without having language for it. If parenting feels exhausting in a way that rest doesn't fix, or if you notice that you're not just parenting, but also watching yourself while you do it, if there's a quiet part of you that's constantly checking, was my tone okay? Should I have responded differently? Am I regulated enough right now to do this? I want you to know that you're not alone and nothing has gone wrong. There's a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from the logistics of parenting, not from the meals, the schedules, all those things. It comes from carrying the awareness on high alert, from holding your nervous system under observation while also trying to show up with care. This episode, to be clear, is not about parenting better. It's not about catching yourself more quickly or correcting yourself more efficiently. And it's definitely not about trying harder to be calm. It's about understanding why this level of self watching can feel so heavy, and how awareness, when paired with pressure, can quietly turn into something that drains us instead of supports us. So, as you listen to today's episode, there's nothing that you need to do, nothing to track, nothing to apply. Just let yourself be here without monitoring yourself, even for a few minutes. That alone is already enough. Much of the exhaustion conscious mothers feel don't come from the parenting. It comes from the monitoring, tracking, and mentally supervising ourselves while parenting. This is the kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. It's so common and normal for conscious mothers and for cycle breaking mothers to care so deeply with how we're raising our children. We are constantly in an emotional awareness that other people may not be aware of. We're constantly in this feeling of, are we enough? Are we parenting the right way? We always are choosing to break patterns, but that also can take a toll on us in the exhaustion of motherhood. I wanted to be aware that this exhaustion, it's not failure. It's actually a byproduct of the awareness turning inward under pressure. It's so hard. There's so much pressure on us as conscious cycle breaking mothers to do the right thing and be the right parent and to do the healing and to show up a certain way. It creates an exhaustion that we don't have a name for. It's also not ever named in the exhaustion of parenthood. So, just to be clear, this episode isn't about parenting better. It's about understanding why being aware can feel so heavy on us as parents. There's a hidden labor of self monitoring. I've never been made aware of this until very recently, what I was recognizing how much of a toll it's taking on me to be self monitoring all the time. Self monitoring in everyday language is about your tone. Did my tone sound fine? Did I speak the right way? Am I speaking kindly? Am I showing up with my children the way I want them to show up later on in life? It's watching reactions of other people. It's watching your own reactions. It's watching how you can support the reactions within your household. It's mentally narrating in your brain what you should be doing so that you can get the outcome that you're looking for. It's noticing tension, trying to regulate it. I can't tell you the number of times that there's tension, and in that moment, I can feel myself rising, but I know that I need to regulate myself before I respond. That is such a hidden labor that causes exhaustion in motherhood. Now let's contrast this with visible parenting labor. These are the things that we can see. So things like feeding, routines, getting your kids to your extracurriculars, bedtime routine, morning routine, getting breakfast, lunch, dinner, all of the things. Those logistics are so obvious to us as parents, and we know that causes exhaustion, and that is labor. Labor of love, but still labor, right? Monitoring our emotions, monitoring that everyday language and that nervous system response is different. Monitoring all of those responses for the nervous system, that's invisible. but it's also very expensive in the form of motherhood. We've talked about this before, about how awareness increases before capacity stabilizes. This is a transition phase that we're in. It's not permanent, and I want you to be really aware of that our system right now is doing two jobs at once, parenting and observing. That is so much work as parents, especially as a cycle breaking parent. It is so much hidden labor. And I want you to know that it's not going to be unaware for you anymore. It's an awareness that you are doing this. And you're not alone in it. There's so many mothers who are doing the same thing, who want the same outcome, to break those cycles and to change generational patterns. And that invisible labor doesn't have an actual term for it. It's never been actually quantified. And we're here today to quantify it and make you aware that this is labor and it is taking sometimes a toll on you. And that's part of why we're here as conscious parents. I want to quickly break down the difference between awareness and surveillance. So awareness is gentle noticing. There's no urgency. It's awareness. Okay, I see this outcome. I see this happening. There's no urgency to change it, but I know that the next time something like this happens, I may want to respond differently. I may want to show up differently. Surveillance is tight attention. So it's threat-based, it's evaluative, and in the body that can feel like tension. Maybe it's in your shoulders. I hold so much tension in my shoulders and my neck. Maybe it's in self-consciousness. Maybe you're out in public and you're wanting to parent a certain way, but you feel self-conscious about parenting that way. Maybe it's in reduced spontaneity. So surveillance can show up in reduced spontaneity and feeling like you're always on stage, having to show up differently than how you may show up without that awareness. Now, this backfires because surveillance can often signify danger into the nervous system. And remember, our goal is to always have a regulated nervous system. If our goal is to have a regulated nervous system, we don't want to increase that danger. But the body then shifts into protection, and then reactivity also increases. So it's actually having a reverse impact on the outcome you want as a conscious parent. Self-awareness can quietly turn into nervous system surveillance, especially when you care so deeply. And I want to make that really clear. We care so deeply for our children. We care so, so deeply, especially our millennials and our Gen Zs that are coming up that are raising families. We care so deeply about our children and supporting them and showing them emotional awareness and showing them love. And that self-awareness can quickly turn into that surveillance. And let's just be aware of that and note that for ourselves as parents so that we can maybe find other tools to stop that in its tracks. Constant self-correction increases that reactivity. We just talked about this a little bit, but I want to dive more into this because I feel like it's a really important topic that not many people speak about. What I'm looking to do here is reframe inconsistency without blaming, because blame has an increased nervous system response. The surveillance is increasing. I'm going to try to explain this as easy as possible. So self-correction often requires a very cognitive effort. We have to think about what we are correcting. When we're stressed, under an intense amount of stress, which can happen in situations that have heightened nervous system response, stress reduces access to that cognitive awareness. The more correction that we demand from ourselves, the less capacity remains. There's been a common theme in the last several podcast episodes. When we have increased response or increased nervous system, our capacity decreases and are more likely to react in those moments, right? The more that you try to stay regulated, the less regulated you feel. If we're always focusing on being regulated, it's so hard to remain present in that regulation. And oftentimes for myself, when I'm trying to be cognitively aware that I need to be regulated, I feel a lot more feelings of shame, of judgment of myself, of judgment from other people, of fear that I'm not doing parenting the right way, or all of these things. And then my capacity lessens and then I react faster. What we want is to have a nice regulated nervous system where we've created the neural pathways to have that regulated nervous system. And then the regulated nervous system is just there, and we feel regulated, and sometimes we may not feel regulated, but we're not cognitively aware of it all the time. And we can have an awareness after an event or right before an event, but it's there, and that's just what it is. The more you try to stay regulated, the less regulated you feel. It's such a paradox because you want to feel regulated, but you don't feel regulated. What isn't happening in these moments is a lack of commitment from you as a parent. Your nervous system doesn't experience constant correction as growth, it experiences it as pressure. But what if we could let the body lead instead of the mind? Too often we're stuck in our mind. We're stuck in our monkey brain, sometimes I call it, of having to feel like we should do all of the things. And a friend of mine calls it, stop shoulding on yourself. Let's let the body lead instead of the mind. Let's let our intuition is telling us over what our brain is commanding of us. Regulation doesn't come from monitoring every single moment of every single day, your tone, how you're showing up, if you've reacted correctly, or referring back on that. It comes from reducing the internal threat. The best way to reduce the internal threat is to name what's going on in our body. So, like maybe having less commentary, fewer internal checklists. I know that when I'm going through a challenge with one of my kids, sometimes I go through a checklist. Okay, first this, then this. Even this morning, like my one son came down and he was just very upset because he woke up later and he wanted to do this morning routine and he didn't have quite enough time to do the morning routine. And he started throwing things around, getting upset and very angry and screaming and saying not kind words and things like that. And I was going through my checklist of, okay, I have to react this way. I need to remain calm. I need to do blah, 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 blah. And yes, I was able to stay regulated, but to what extent? There was a little bit of exhaustion after that because I went through my mental checklist. I was using my cognitive load. I had to do those things, right? But what if I let my body lead in that moment instead and had fewer, less internal checklists and maybe a little bit more tolerance for imperfect presence? I didn't have to be perfect in that moment. I thought I did because I'm leading this change in my family. But I didn't have to be perfect. If I screwed up a little bit, it's not the end of the world. The point is that I was being present in that moment with him, right? And I could have let my body take over and led the way that my intuition would be telling me to lead. I just want to clarify that this is not giving up responsibility. It's not letting it all go. It's not bypassing that awareness. It's just tuning in to what our body is telling us to do in those moments. And that deep intuition that we have as mothers is so powerful that when we can tap into that, we are unstoppable. And that is what breaks the patterns and cycles. Because we're allowing ourselves to feel in our body how we should respond to a situation. We're allowing ourselves to be regulated because this is just who we are. And we're reducing any internal threats by allowing our body to lead. The body doesn't need to be managed. Our brain thinks that we need to be managed, but our body doesn't need to be managed. It needs to feel safe enough to organize itself. And when we give ourselves an environment that we can feel safe in just being and tapping into that intuition, it's able to organize the next step accordingly without having an internal checklists or anything that increases our nervous system response in that moment. I'd love to invite you to soften a little bit in your responses. So a little bit of an experiment, I should say. I would love for you in that next moment of dysregulation. Notice when the quote unquote watcher comes online. So that part of your brain that's starting to watch your actions, your words, your tone, all of those things. Notice when it starts to come online. Don't try to stop it, but just notice it. And simply by noticing it, you'll be able to loosen it. This may look like dropping one note-taking habit, like internal note-taking habit, or maybe letting a moment pass without having self-review of that moment. Or maybe it's allowing presence without the internal commentary that is constantly running in your brain. So I want you just to notice when that watcher comes online. You don't have to do anything about it, but just notice it. You don't have to do this every time. It's not going to come out perfect. It's just an ability to notice when that ding, our brain has been turned on, and maybe we need to go back into our body a little bit and parent from our body. It's a little bit of an integration that you can practice to help regulate that nervous system or just become aware of when we are starting to have that internal dialogue that leads to that exhaustion. So when you feel that hidden exhaustion settling in, just know that doesn't mean that there's any failure here. It's actually proof of how much awareness that you're carrying. As we close out this episode, let's notice how we can move from monitoring, that internal monitoring that's constantly running, to trusting our intuition and trusting our body and trusting as conscious parents that we're going to make the right choices and right decisions. Or maybe we can shift from surveillance into feeling safe in that nervous system response. You're allowed to parent without narrating yourself. You're allowed to do that. Consistency will always come from when the watching that you always have in your brain softens. You're not tired from parenting. You're tired from constantly watching yourself and your actions and your tone and your feeling. And that can change without you feeling like you have to try harder. I've created a private space where you can process things like this without being judged. And you have the ability to turn off your internal brain and write things out instead. Something to help you feel regulated before you react. I'll leave the link to that in the show notes below. It's always there for you whenever you need it. Just grab it and have it as a tool in your tool belt for the next time that you feel yourself come online and you really want to step into parenting from the body. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode, and I will see you next week in the next episode of the Legacy Shift podcast.